Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Homewrecker Podcast. I am the Golden Greek Alex Arion, joined as always by my beautiful, lovely, gorgeous, amazing trophy wife, Monique. Monique, how are you this week?
Hello, I'm wonderful, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic as always.
Excellent, yeah. I feel like I'm either lovely or wonderful for the most part.
You feel lovely or wonderful?
No, every time you ask me that every week, I feel like it's either I'm lovely or I'm wonderful or great. It's always good. I need to think of new adjectives.
But if you're lovely and wonderful, why would you need to think of anything different to describe it?
True.
I mean, I'm fantastic as always. So if I say I'm excellent, is that different or better?
No, it's
worse?
It's different. It's different
Just
words.
different?
Yeah.
So you're all about the variety. You can't just
Yes.
be the same all the time.
Yes, I'm a Sagittarius. It's just how I am.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
That's astrological.
It's gotta be.
Okay. Well, anyhow, so we're here this week. We are going to be talking about something pretty interesting. I guess we'll determine whether or not we believe it when all is said and done, but it's a pretty fascinating story that takes place in the early 1980s in a place called Dodleston, England. We're going to call this one the Dodleston Messages.
All right.
I first heard about this story back about 2.5 years ago on another podcast, actually, the Mysterious Universe podcast, which is a pretty big podcast. It's a couple of guys out of Australia that do a podcast pretty much talking about kind of like the same stuff we do, a lot of paranormal, weird kind of stuff. And this is where I first heard about the story. So basically the story is, it revolves around a gentleman by the name of Ken Webster, who was an economics teacher and also a musician. So he that was like a hobby of his, he was a musician. So he lived in this cottage in the small town of Dodleston, England, and he lived with his girlfriend at the time. I'm not sure, I've looked, but I can't find any info on whether or not these two are still together. But at the time, his girlfriend's name, Deb Oakes, was living with him, and they also had a friend of his that was living with them, a woman by the name of Nicola. So basically what happened was Ken brought home a computer from school, and you got to think back that this is the early 80s, so the computer he brought home was an early 8-bit BBC microcomputer running the Edward II software. Yeah, old, right? This is primitive by today's standards. And all it was just basically it was a computer that had a word processor and no graphics. Real basic.
Yeah.
Kind of like we've been watching the X-Files lately, and you know towards the end of the episode you'll either have Mulder or Scully typing into a screen and all you see is just a little cursor and their words come up as they're typing, right? It's kind of similar to that type of deal. So pretty much what started happening was Ken one day discovered a secret file, well, not a secret file, but a file on his word processor that was titled KDM. K as in Ken, D as in Delta, M as in Michael. So KDM. And in it, he discovered some text that was really, the formatting was weird, the language itself was weird. It appeared to him, in his untrained eye, to be Old English, just the way the words were spelled and the type of words that were used. It wasn't anything that was current, and he had a hard time making it up, but to his best guess, it was Old English. Now, it's funny, the first two lines, I wrote them down, I'm going to read them here. Ken, Deb, Nick, and I see, true are the nightmares of a person that fears. So those are the first two lines. Now, I'll let you look at it, but you can see I copied it out the way that it was spelled and written in the book, and this is how it allegedly appeared on his computer. You can see the K in Ken is capitalized, and then a space, and then Deb. N-I, lowercase, space C, I presume would mean for Nicola, for the girl, the other girl that was there. True are the nightmares, and then all the letters in night are capitalized. Of a person, the E in person is capitalized. that fears, and then there's a space between the T and the H in the word that. It's just spelled really weird, and then all the letters except for the S are capitalized in fears. So he immediately was kind of weirded out by this, understandably so, kind of strange. So what ends up happening over a period of several months is he starts typing messages back and forth with whoever left him this message. And essentially he determines that the writing is Old English. He brings the messages that he's getting to a friend of his in the school that he's teaching at. And this guy determines that, yeah, this is Old English. This is like 16th century English language. And it's pretty accurate. He, I guess, compared it to some texts that he was familiar with or what have you. And so it was determined that he was communicating with somebody from the year 1540.
Interesting.
Yeah, you with me so far? So far?
I'm with you, yeah.
Now, while this communication is happening back and forth, there's also some poltergeist activity that's happening in the cottage. Objects are getting moved. They come home one day and their furniture is all stacked against one wall. Just weird stuff like that. The computer is getting relocated into different spots in the house. At one time they find the computer in the bathroom where nobody that was in the house knows how it got there. They all claim they didn't do it. Now again, I'm going to say claimed and allegedly because this is all the accounts of Ken Webster, which he documents in the book The Vertical Plane, which was so hard to get for the longest time because he wrote this back in the late 80s.
Well, why don't you explain to everyone about the book and why it was hard to get?
Well, it was out of print. It went out of print.
But how did it come back into print?
Because of that podcast. I'm assuming it's because of the podcast and the interest that it generated in this case. Because as soon as I heard the story, I'm like, oh, I gotta get this book. I want to read about this story. I want to get more in depth and see the actual messages and all that kind of thing. And it was impossible to get it. You could find it on Amazon for like $400 for a paperback copy of the book. Which I don't care how your funds are. That's a little steep price for a book. So, but it just actually ended up coming out. The publisher reprinted it about a year and a half ago. So as soon as it was available, I snatched it up just like that. And really, really interesting story.
I remember when you first told me about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really interesting. So I was like, look into it more and let me know. But
yeah.
I think that was before you actually were able to get the book.
Yeah, because I told you about the story when I heard about it on that show, and I was unable to get a copy of the book. I was looking everywhere. I was looking on eBay. I was looking on thrift bookshops online, just trying to find a copy, and they were all just super expensive. The word must have got out that this was a coveted text. But again, it finally, when it did come out, like I said, I snatched up a copy right away and got to reading. So back to the story. This is a very layered story. A lot of stuff going on. Now I mentioned the poltergeist activity.
Yes.
So they at first the people that were communicating with this person, whoever from the year 1540, yeah. we don't know again what was going on exactly, but they were first identifying themselves as the name Lucas. Turns out that wasn't the real name. They gave a false name because, according to them, they didn't trust Ken and Deb and Nicola. They thought that they were playing a trick on them or something. They were calling the method of communication a box of lights. That's how they were referred to the computer. Because now, if you believe that this person was really in 1540 and somehow through some weird time warp or time slip, that they were communicating through the computer itself, but they said that they could not actually touch it, but they could see it. So don't ask me how the method of type or the words were coming up on the screen if they couldn't actually physically touch the computer. I don't know how that works. I wasn't there. I don't understand but that's what was communicated. Now, not only did they communicate through the computer itself, but also through some charcoal and paper that was left out for the purposes of communication, because what Ken and Deb thought was that there was some kind of a weird portal or time rift, kind of time sharing, dimensional sharing, something like that was happening there. So they figured if you can't communicate with the computer, you can communicate with this. So that was happening too. They were getting messages through that as well. Not just the computer,
So was this from the 1600s guy?
1540, 16th century. But
16th century, sorry. Yeah,
yes.
1500s guy.
Yeah.
Was he able to...
Yes,
touch
they
the
were.
chalk,
They
just
were.
not the computer?
They were getting the charcoal, and yeah, it was weird. I don't understand a lot of this, and I may jump around a little bit as I get more details popping in my head that I gotta mention to you. Deb, the girlfriend of Ken Webster, was able to see this gentleman who later identified himself as Thomas, was his real name. She saw him in her dreams. She communicated with him through her dreams, and Thomas was then saying how he had the interaction with her through the communications. So he was saying how, yes, I talked to you with my girlfriend Catherine, and we had a big fight because you keep appearing in our house and she thinks there's something going on. So somehow, this woman, Deb, is dreaming. And while she's dreaming, she's apparently, I don't know if it's astral projection or what, but somehow she is in Thomas's time in the 1540s, in the same location, because again, the cottage, apparently that same location was occupied then by Thomas in 1540. And Thomas and Catherine, Thomas's girlfriend in 1540, can see her and communicate and talk with her. Now again, she's dreaming. And when she leaves, they get in a big fight. And he's communicating this, that Deb is causing problems with Catherine and I. It's all this stuff that's happening. Yeah. It's just weird. It's very bizarre. Go ahead.
Well,
you think you're going to say something. Go ahead.
I look at it like, okay, it could just be everything going on is entering her subconscious, so she's dreaming about it. Because that can happen. Is it an astral projection where she's going in and out of time? Possibly, but I wonder if there's something with where they are, where there's some kind of portal opening, time, I don't know if it's like a time slip or something that they keep sliding in and out of, like a swing, kind of in and out, and maybe like they can kind of take turns going back and forth.
I don't know, but it gets weirder.
Okay.
Now, once Ken goes and he tries to research and see, was there ever a person who this person claims was there ever a Lucas that was taught at this school? Because Thomas, as Lucas, before he came out and said my real name is Thomas, said he was a professor, he taught at this school, this is where he lived, he gave all this information. So Ken and Deb went to try to verify it through the archives and through the library records and things like that. They were unable to. So they called him on it. And now the whole time, Ken is thinking, this is my neighbor or a friend of mine, that this is just a hoax. This is not real. There's no way this can be real. And it's kind of, when you read his book, a lot of times he'll even say that. So it's kind of hard to follow a little bit in the book as he's talking, because he relays these fantastic things that are happening, these unexplainable, incredible things. But his commentary about them will be, I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. I just wanted to move on with my life. I thought it was crazy. So it's like, all right, dude, do you believe this is happening? Do you believe this is real, or do you believe it's a hoax? So he's trying to verify whether or not this is true, and he calls him out on it when he says, I looked you up, there's no such person. And when he did that, that's when Lucas came out and said, actually my name is Tomas Harden, I believe was his last name. And at that point, Ken went back again. They verified, yes, there was somebody by that name that lived there at that time who had his academic credentials. He was a professor at a university who actually was expelled from the university because he refused to remove some text about the Pope in one of his writings. So they expelled him from the university. And yeah, he lived there. He was a legitimate person. Now, whether or not that was who he was communicating with is still up for speculation. Mm-hmm. But when he gave that name, Ken was able to verify it. Now, it wasn't just Ken and Deb that were witnesses to this. He brought on a friend of his, brought a friend of his into the mix. The friend of his that was at the university, the professor. I believe his name was Peter. I have to look, I apologize. Where did I put it? Sorry. Peter Tindridge or Tinder. Goodness. Sorry. Good thing we can edit this one. It's live, pal. Peter Trinder, that's what it was. Okay, so Peter Trinder, a friend of his, another teacher at his school, and this is the guy who was kind of an expert in that old English language, and he's the one who also witnessed these events. Like, he witnessed these communications, he saw them happen. Deb's mother was also another eyewitness who witnessed these things happen, and there was also another friend of Ken's who's unnamed, who was another apparent eyewitness. Now, they did bring on a paranormal research team to investigate these events because, like I said, they were having these poltergeist things that were happening as well, all these things moving and the house shaking, things like that. Just normal, typical, I say normal, but typical reports of poltergeist activity. They were experiencing this in their cottage. So they brought on this team. This team, again, I'm not a paranormal research expert or anything, but I think they flooded this investigation. They didn't really do a very good job. According to Ken and according to other reports that I've read as well, they don't have any records of their investigation, so that's one. So they didn't keep any records. They immediately blew the whole thing off as a hoax, and they tried to communicate with Thomas, thank you. I've got so many names in my head now, I'm trying to keep them all straight. But they're trying to communicate with Thomas, and we're getting nothing in return. So they immediately blew it off, and they said, it's probably just Ken and Deb, they're hoaxing the whole thing. Which, again, a story like this, as unbelievable and fantastic as it sounds, I could see where you may want to write it off as that, but to not actually keep any records.
To not document
anything. To not actually, not document anything, not to really kind of, if that's your job and you're purporting yourself to be an expert in this kind of matter, and you're not doing any kind of real scientific analysis of the situation, it's just kind of weird. So, anyhow, it gets really interesting when Thomas comes out and says that, yes, my name is actually Thomas. Now they start getting messages from another person. There's another party that enters the mix here. This is where it gets a little wacky. 2109. That is the name of the group that they called themselves a group. 2109. They are claiming they are from the year 2109, and that Ken, by calling out and figuring out that Lucas was actually Thomas, they're calling him out and saying that you've ruined our experiments.
Okay, wait a minute. 2089.
2109.
2109. What was 1984?
1984 is the year that
Ken
Ken
was
was in.
the 1500 year?
1540.
Okay, because I was going to say 2109?
2109.
Doesn't that come out to 9, 10,
We're not
11, 12?
We're not gonna do numerology.
Okay, I'm just thinking numerology.
Stop.
Like, okay, we got 3, 3.
Let's not get into that right now.
Okay.
Let's not get crazy with numerology. Is that it? You were just gonna make a numerology?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about the years and I'm trying to add them up, and I'm like, interesting. I'm just trying to see if there's any dots I can connect.
Apparently, 2109 is claiming that they are conducting an experiment, and that Ken, by figuring out that Lucas was really Thomas, he's messed up their experiment, and they want him to stop immediately.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right. So like I said, it gets a little crazy there.
The nerve of
Now,
him.
2109 also has Ken call in somebody else to help to verify the case, if you will.
Okay.
A paranormal researcher by the name of Gary Rowe. They specifically ask for him by name. And at this point, Ken decides, okay, I'll go along with this, whatever it is. Because I failed to mention, I apologize, 2109 came up because Thomas said he did not trust Ken and Deb and Nicola at first because he thought they were just friends of 2109. And that's when Ken's like, who's 2109? And then 2109 enters the conversation. It's weird. Yeah, it's very just bizarre how this whole thing is going on. Yeah. So apparently 2109 has been communicating with Thomas, Lucas, in the 1540s. And now Ken has kind of entered into this, I guess, bridge between times.
Yeah. And
interfered, allegedly, with the experiments of this 2109 group. Weird, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, they bring Gary Rowe into the picture, and Gary Rowe, they have to, there's like a whole thing that they have to do. They have to sign affidavits that the papers that they're giving each other, because what happens is 2109 wants sealed communications between them and Gary Rowe to take place with Ken as the conduit, with Ken not knowing the content of the messages. It's really bizarre.
Okay.
So Ken has to take whatever messages he's getting that he prints out on his computer. He cannot look at them. He has to seal them in an envelope and deliver them to Gary Rowe, who then writes back or whatever, however they do it. Because again, Gary Rowe has come out and said he will not say what he was supposed to do or the communications that he had, but all he says is that he's sitting on the information that could make him a rich man beyond anyone's wildest imagination, but he is not going to release it, I guess because he was entrusted to keep the secrets. But he's saying that he knows in his heart, he's sitting on it, the story is true and everything is true, and he cannot say how he validated it, but he validated it, and it's 100% accurate and true, and that 2109 is really from 2109, and that Thomas is really from 1540, and the whole thing was legit, according to Gary Rowe, but he will not say how he verified it, how he came to this conclusion. He will not release any of that information, so it's very kind of, take my word for it, and
it's hard
trust
because
it.
You could look at it from two different aspects. He's a good guy who's trying to do the right thing and keep this information. Like, he's like, I did my research, but I can't release it because he was entrusted with it. Or it could very easily be him just saying that to look like the good guy, but he really has nothing.
Exactly, that's the thing. So it's kind of hard to determine like what's going on here.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where the story ends. After some communications back and forth with 2109 and some... and I left out a part. There was a fun development, I don't know about fun, but interesting development that happened with Ken and Thomas. And Thomas was... Apparently he was accused of witchcraft back in the 1540s because he was communicating with somebody through this light box. I guess the people that he told in his time thought he was crazy, which I guess understandable, right?
Yeah.
And so he was actually arrested and put in jail. And at the time that he was in jail, a friend of his who believed him went to his cottage and saw the light box and communicated through the light box with Ken and Deb and let them know that you've gotten my friend in trouble. And
bastards.
Yeah, you've gotten my friend in trouble. He's in jail. They're gonna execute him. Whatever, the witchcraft, all this stuff they're accusing him of. And so Ken and Deb feel bad, so they tell the guy, bring the sheriff so we can talk to him.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get him out of this mess that he's in. And so, of course, the sheriff comes to the cottage, sees the light box, and immediately becomes a believer and believes what's going on because he actually sees it and gets the communication from Ken and Deb saying, we are not demons, but we have the powers of demons, and we will make your life a living hell if you don't let our friend go. So, of course, they let the friend go, and he comes back, and he's just under house arrest now until he's cleared of all the charges. But that was kind of an interesting development in the story that I thought was
Did they ever see that in the history, like this guy was accused of witchcraft?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I saw. I don't know. I don't know if they kept those kind of records. I mean, the records that they found were that he was a professor, that his tenure was from this year to this year, and that he was expelled and the reason for his expulsion. That kind of stuff, yes, but I don't know if they kept records for...
Did they ever...
I mean, he was never convicted, so I don't know if you would have a record of that.
Did they ever ask him to, like, bury something under the cottage or in the backyard of the cottage so they could, like, dig it up, like, in a certain location so then they could, like, dig it up to see?
That's like Hollywood, that's like Hollywood, what's the word I'm looking for?
But if you're
it's like verifying something like you'd see in a Hollywood movie. Yeah, no, you're right, though.
But, like,
I mean,
if they're from that point in time, put it somewhere where it wouldn't be touched if they're in the same location.
Right.
Put it where it won't reasonably be found or touched, and then go look and see if it's there.
Did that happen? No, but when you mention that, I'm like, that's totally like a Hollywoodized way of verifying something, but it would actually, I guess in theory, would work if this actually happened, if this was a true thing. But not to my knowledge, no, that was not done. Now, again, I mean, everything he documented to the best of, I presume to the best of his recollection, everything in his book, The Vertical Plane, but I'm sure there may have been other things that were not put in the book that may have happened. We don't know what Gary Rowe did to get any kind of verification. And Gary Rowe is actually, he's been active on a couple of different message boards and blog boards and things like that, where he's commented on this particular case and given his thoughts on some things, but he still has not come out and verified anything. Oh, I'm sorry, there's another, see, that's what I mean, like, things I'm going to remember and pop into my head. Thomas, before he ended communications, said that he was going to write a book, and that he ended up writing a book with the help of his friend and publishing it so that people would know that what happened really happened. 2109 says that the book was written and published, but it was hidden. But it will eventually come out, and when it's discovered, everybody will see that what happened was true. People have been looking for this book since this whole ordeal happened. Nobody's found it yet. But 2109 says it will be found. They didn't say when it'll be found, but that it will be found. And when it's found, this account will be proven to be true. I am presuming that Gary Rowe must know something about this book, I would think, because otherwise how else would you... I can't, I guess, I'm sure there's ways, but I can't think of ways that he would have verified this whole story to be true. And his communications that he had, that was another thing, with the communications he was having back and forth with 2109, I'm talking about Gary Rowe now, when he was passing the envelopes, when they were getting passed back and forth, Deb noticed that there was some strange markings that would appear on the envelopes that were not put there by her or by Ken. They would just appear as they were giving the communication back and forth to Gary Rowe. Yeah, really weird stuff.
You told me about this. I think it would be interesting to share one of the poltergeist like things that happened in their cottage with the footprints.
Yeah, and that's actually, thanks for bringing that up, that's actually how the story starts in the book. Ken details how, he starts the book off, he gives a little bit of a background of the type of town that Dodleston is. It's a small town, quiet town, a lot of kids playing, yards, that kind of thing. And he has Nicola move in because Nicola was living abroad. I say abroad, she was like in Africa or something, and was teaching and wasn't making any money, so she came back home and needed a place to stay. So he figured, I'll let her stay here until she gets on her feet, and she can help redecorate my place, because it's just this is a mess. He's a single guy. Well, he was living with his girlfriend, but he's a bachelor guy living, whatever. So, I mean, you know how I was when you moved in with me. Not big into decorating. I don't know. So I'm guessing that that's what it was. But anyway, in exchange for her decorating his cottage, she could live there with him and his girlfriend. While they were there one day, she noticed that there was some strange footprints that were appearing on the wall, walking up the wall and to the ceiling. And they appeared to have 6 toes, but they couldn't really make it out. So they were kind of looking over them, kind of puzzled at the sight of them, and not really sure what they were, if they were footprints or what it was. But they appeared to have been there for a while. They just, I don't know. Again, they were faded, So they ended up painting over them, and then the next day, Ken comes into the room and notices fresh footprints, and now he can tell, yeah, there's definitely 6 toes. And they're going, not in the exact same spot, but now they're in a different spot, kind of shifted over on that same wall, but going up the wall and to the ceiling. And so he immediately is like, well, okay, who's messing with me?
Yeah.
What's going on here? He calls the women into the room, they see it, and one of them freaks out. Nicola freaks out, doesn't want to be in there. She immediately is spooked about the whole thing. And again, they just think that it's... He thinks it's got to be kids or somebody just playing a prank, because back then, people didn't really lock their doors. It was a small town. People tended to meet each other. Not to my knowledge. There's plenty of pictures in the book. There's none of that. Because he said that they painted over them again, and they never appeared again after that. But that incident is what opens the book.
Okay.
But yeah, pretty weird, right?
It's weird, and it's like, I wonder if there's like fae, if they're fairies, and they're just messing with them, and they're moving the things around.
That could be. I mean, I don't know. But the weird thing is and actually that theory could explain the messages, because if it's something that's been around that long, maybe speaking in that kind of a language, maybe that's just the language. An
elemental.
Something like that, sure. I don't know. If this is real, that's as good an explanation as any, I guess.
Well, what I'm
is it any more far-fetched
than... Did somebody open a portal? Let's say 2109 opened up a portal like
2109.
I thought I said 2109.
You said 200109.
2109.
Yeah, that one.
Opened up this type of portal, and because of that, maybe elementals were able to travel through it and be a part of it, so it attracted fae.
Maybe.
And that's why everything got moved around, and there's footprints.
Who knows? That's the thing with this whole deal. It's so just bizarre, and it could be anything. It could be a complete, total hoax, the whole thing, but just a very well done hoax, because just the Old English alone, I guess it was the messages were brought to several different experts who all verified that they were definitely Old English. Mm-hmm. The dialect all matched. Everything seemed to be legitimate, and it was verified as being that language, and that's how people would speak back then. So they went through a hell of a lot of effort to pull off this hoax. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And people who knew Ken have come out since online. I did a lot of digging and research online, different message boards, websites, things like that. And there are people, again, it's all online, so who knows, but there are people that claim to know Ken who say that he was a pretty normal, straightforward... I mean, the guy was an economics teacher. Not that that excuses you from any kind of question, but he was an economics teacher. His friend, his buddy, Mr. Trinder, who helped him verify the Old English language, was also like a pretty old school, straightforward kind of guy. They weren't really the type that seemed to be into this kind of thing. And like I said, even reading the book, Ken comes off like he thinks the whole thing's ridiculous.
Well, I think possibly the reason for that, you can look at it one of a few ways. He's doing that because he truly is a skeptic and he doesn't quite believe it himself. Yeah. And he's trying to grasp what's really happening. Or he's trying to do it to look like he's a skeptic if he's really fabricating everything.
Sure.
Or maybe he just he truly believes what's going on is real, but he wants to appear skeptical because he doesn't want to be judged as harshly.
It could be any of those things.
Or something I didn't say, too. I mean,
sure.
There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, of course. That's the thing. Okay.
I get the feeling like he's skeptical, like he can't quite grasp what's going on, and that is probably why he's saying that. But who really knows?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows with the whole thing? Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But what do you think over with this whole thing? Like, do you think that something? I mean, obviously, it's not something that happens all the time. But do you think this is something that could possibly happen? That just sitting there with this primitive machine able to communicate through time?
We've heard so many stories about so many different things.
Yeah.
That have happened with time and other dimensions. I think it's totally possible.
do you believe, I mean, obviously just based on what I'm telling you, knowing the details that I've given you, just again, to the best of my recollection and the notes I've taken, do you believe this particular story?
I don't know. I don't quite necessarily understand it all, I guess you could say. Does that mean it's not true? No. I think it would be pretty cool if it was true.
Oh yeah, I mean it is tough to follow because there's so much to it. And again, when 2109 appears, that's the part that it gets really wacky. They're very cryptic with their messages. A lot of the things they say are just kind of like, okay, it just doesn't make any sense, a lot of the stuff. And the introduction of Gary Rowe into the story, it just kind of...
What year did John Teeter say he was from?
2036.
Okay.
So they're not connected.
But if he had things where I'm just saying, if this is, I'm just trying to look at things we discussed before.
Yeah.
Because if he could time travel, then by that point, I'm sure they could do things with.
I'm gonna throw something at you that this was a term used by 2109 in communications. They talked about tachyons. Have you heard that word or term before? Okay, so. That term was used by them in their communications back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a term that didn't really resurface or that anybody knew what it was until CERN came into prominence, and they're using that now. That's a term that's used in describing the Higgs boson particle that they say they've discovered. I don't know what that means. I'm not into physics or any of that stuff. I mean, I've read some things, but as far as me retaining that information, it's not something that holds my interest enough to, I guess, to really determine whether or not it's valid. Though. It is interesting that they use those terms.
It's these weird coincidences.
Yeah.
It makes you question it.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, was that because somebody from CERN read this book, knew the story, and said, hey, we need to name this particle. Well, we'll call it a tachyon. That seems kind of cool.
Possibly.
Or is it because 2109 is really from the future, and they knew that tachyons would be used to describe these particles that CERN was discovering? I don't know. It could be. It could be any of these things, right? That's the genius of the story if it's a hoax.
Pretty much.
You can explain it in so many different ways. You can justify it in so many different ways. That's why stories like this are so fascinating, because you can go, it's a hoax because this, and this. But then you can also go, but it's not a hoax because this, and this. It's got all these different...
It does. It's awesome.
These different elements, right?
It's really cool.
Now, I'm really surprised. This book came out in I believe the book was printed in 87 or 88. And it had a limited print run. They did a story on it on a UK documentary series in the 90s. So it happened in the UK, as we said, and they did a documentary on it in the UK. And then it didn't really get a lot of play after that, but I'm really surprised that just the story itself being what it is and being as fascinating as it is, that they never actually made a movie about it or anything. Now, that may happen now. Who knows, right?
Yeah, it's becoming more popular because of that podcast.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of different blogs talking about it now, and I've seen it pop up on a couple of different paranormal message boards.
So how exactly, how did the communications cease?
I believe it was 2109 said that they're only going to go until a certain time. I apologize, but I am not 100% certain. Let me look. I'm going to edit this. That was another thing. We're gonna jump around a little bit, but there are 2 chapter 7s in this book, which is weird. There's a chapter 7 that comes after chapter 6, and there's a chapter 7 that is sandwiched in between chapters 24 and 25.
Interesting.
Which is weird. Or excuse me, 23 and 24. There's 2 chapter 7s. Now, in one of the message board posts that Gary Rowe was communicating on, he was talking with somebody and somebody asked him about the 2 chapter 7s, and he said that there's a lot of information in the book that if you read between the lines, you'll be able to gather a lot more information. And one of those is chapter 7. Pretty weird, pretty interesting. So I read over chapter 7 a bunch, and I the second chapter 7 Gary Rowe was talking about, and I can't make heads or tails of it. I'm not sure. Another interesting thing that I did, and we'll get back to your original question, I apologize, but while I'm thinking of it, you know how recently we've been talking about the TV show Hellier?
Yeah.
Because
I was thinking about that as you were talking about this. A few things came up.
So, just for fun, before we started, and I didn't tell you I did this, but just for fun, I went to naeq.io. This is the website that anything you input in here, it does the secret cipher.
I wanted to do that.
Really?
I was thinking, okay, we're going to have to do another show on this because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to run the numbers of that what he sent, that sentence.
Ken Debnick, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. I ran that in just for the hell of it, just to see what I get for results. I had 92 matches. Now, some of these are just, okay, I don't get it, but some of them are pretty interesting. Like I said, there's 92 matches, there's 92 results. It's a lot.
So why don't you
read all of them.
Some of the interesting ones?
Sure. Let's see the first one. Mystical lord, the half of the word of Herura, ha called hur, pa krot and ra hur cut. Don't know what that is.
You'd have to look that up.
Another one. The law love under will the priest of the princes, Ankh fn konsu. The cube in the circle come unto me is a foolish word for it. Beauty's sake and love's despise, also all cowards, professional soldiers who dare. Alright. Us, the 5-pointed star with a circle in the middle, and the 5-pointed star with a circle in the middle. That's a pentagram, right? Or
a pentacle?
Or a pentacle. I guess you can't really tell if it's upside down or not from just that, but a king thou canst not hurt him, therefore strike hard and low and to hell. There is help and hope in other spells, wisdom says be strong then. Thought that was interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, just kind of like, what? So I entered that, and I entered it exactly as it's spelled in the book, with the capitals and the spaces and everything, and that's what I got. Now, if you mess with that, if you don't put it in exactly, you get different results. So I put it in exactly as it appeared in the text. This is what I'm getting. A single robe and covered with a rich headdress. I love you, I yearn too. Pretty interesting.
Maybe that's why Catherine was getting jealous.
Against the people, O my chosen, I am the secret serpent. Oh. So I'm reading a couple of these and I'm just thinking, okay, is this like a demonic entity perhaps? You could say that because of the poltergeist activity that's taking place.
Yeah.
We know that there's tricksters and things like that, right? Is it a trickster that's just playing games and having some fun with Mr. Webster and Deb? I don't know. Because if you really think about it, a demonic entity or something like that would know, okay, there was a person living here at this time. I could just, I guess, right?
But it's also plausible.
It could, right, yeah, that's the thing. It's as plausible a theory as any other one, right? Based on the fantastical elements of this story, why not go with a fantastical theory?
Yeah. I'm calling Faye.
That's what you think this is?
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of time rifting going on, but I think the Fae have kind of worked their way into it as well.
How about this one? 4 gates to one palace. The floor of that palace is of silver and gold.
Interesting, because 4 gates I think of north, south, east, west.
So does that mean that maybe this particular cottage is on a piece of land that sits geographically somewhere that maybe a portal?
But that's what I'm saying, because where the location is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to fall back to Hellier.
Go for it.
When they're in Kentucky, in, I think, Somerset, and one of the guys they're talking to is saying how the apartment they lived in.
Yeah.
the girlfriend, she'd see like
the wife.
The wife would see
yeah.
the thermostat like slide and move.
Yeah.
And I wondered, are they in this position? I think, was it like the
37th parallel?
Yeah, but I think where that town is, it's the 52nd when I tried looking it up.
Okay.
So I don't know enough about that to speak of it, but I was like, I wonder what parallel it is on the other side. But I was like, yeah, no, it's I think the 52nd. But I just wondered, are there these magical kind of dimensions where just in the right spot these things can happen? Has anyone ever had anything happen to them in that cottage after you moved out?
Yes, is what has been recorded, but nobody can get details. The only thing I was able to find was that there have been people that lived there after Ken moved out, and that they also had experiences, but it didn't say what. So I thought that was a little strange. Now
it could be
because the people that lived there didn't want any publicity. They didn't want any
they
attention.
think of resale value.
I guess.
Because people think a house is haunted. Well, nowadays people think a house is haunted. They'll probably be more apt to want to go buy it. But back in the 80s and 90s,
perhaps, I don't know. But that's the only information I could find was that after Ken moved out, the residents that moved in after, I don't know if it was the people right after or a couple people down the road, who knows. But that people did have experiences. It didn't say what type of experiences. It didn't say if they were poltergeist, if it was electronic communications. It didn't say. But it did say that the other residents did have experiences.
That's interesting.
Now, again, read into that what you want, but I don't know. Now, there was another book that also documented and gave a little bit of an update on the case, and that was the book Phantom Messages by William J. Hall and Jimmy Petanito. I believe I'm saying that last name correctly. And they documented as well. And they have a little bit of communication with Gary Rowan here, too, where he, again, kind of briefly talks about the story, but he doesn't really give anything away as far as why he believes it's real. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's tough to say, but again, Tomas Harden, he was a real person from Dodleston. According to the 1884 Oxford Historical Society records, yeah, he lived there, and I believe he said he was a graduate of law in 1538. So yeah, the records have this person existing. So he was there when he said he was there. So, I don't know.
Again, a skeptic could say, well, they just looked that up, they found somebody and went with it.
Now I'm going to go back to your original question of how did the communication end. 2109 provided a date that all communications between everybody would end. So I mentioned that before, that I thought that was the case. It is the case. I'm verifying again, I'm reading this book. And now, this is something that was not in the Vertical Plane book, but in this Phantom Messages book, they talk about how the date that 2109 provided came and went, and a guest of Ken and Deb's insisted that they try again to communicate. Ken obliged, and a message did appear, but it wasn't Thomas. The message had no meaning to Ken or Deb. However, the guest turned white when she read the message and fainted. After recovering, she refused to talk about it with anyone. Yeah, kind of weird, right? Now, reading that, and again, with some of the other stuff that I've read, Gary Rowe said that, because he was questioned on the validity of this again on one of the message boards, and he said that 2109, in their communications, was providing him with personal information about himself that nobody else knew. And that's how he knew they were legitimate. Because they were telling him things about himself that only he would know. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what could that be? What can you what? You scratch your ass when you go to sleep at night? What is it that they know about you that nobody else would know?
Is it because they can see what he's doing, or is it they've looked up his history?
But it's only things that he said only he would know. Not his wife, not anybody, only he would know. So is that because they are able to, again, like you said, it's because they can see through history and see things that he's done? Can they observe people in any environment at any time? When you're, in the shower? You know what I mean? Like, can they just see you wherever you are? Or, I don't. But he said that is what caught his attention and verified to him that what was happening was something legitimate. And he said that he verified it through other means, which he was not at liberty to discuss. But that one of the things that made him a believer at first was the fact that he was given information in these sealed communications, these sealed envelopes between 2109 and himself, through Ken and Deb. He was given personal information that only he knew about himself, that nobody else would know. So make of that what you will. This is what he was saying.
So did anyone else, after that woman who fainted, did they try it again to see if it
Not
worked?
to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Now, I have to bring up, too, that the computer, it was not Ken's, it was the school's property, and he was just borrowing it from the school and bringing it home to do work projects and things like that. And he also thought that Nicola could use it for finding jobs, things of that nature. So that's why...
Were computers rather large in the 80s?
This was a small computer. There's pictures of it in the book. It was one of the first microcomputers that was that was released. So it wasn't enormous, but it wasn't. It was you know, you ever see like a small Mac, like one of the first Macs? It was about that size. So I mean, it wouldn't take up this whole table or anything, but it probably it was a good size.
Because I'm just thinking if he's going back.
It was portable. It was
okay.
portable. So yeah, I mean, it was small enough to be portable.
Okay.
And yeah, he would take it to and from the school, so it wasn't, and it was always the same computer. So
Because you wonder, is it somebody from the school trying to
messing with them, or but things would happen where the computer would be in the cottage for days at a time. It's not like it would be no message, take it to the school, come home and have some. You know what I mean? It was things would happen.
But I'm saying if somebody knew he had the computer, maybe.
Absolutely, it could be possible. Now, again, when I was going through the message boards and reading through a lot of the different theories and things like that, there was somebody that came on claiming to be friends of the Professor Tindrer, who spoke about him and was able to get him to talk about the experience, because again, he was an eyewitness of the whole thing. He's the one that verified the messages were Old English. And this person said that he was a very old school, straightforward kind of guy, and when talking about the case, he seemed to believe that it was legitimate because he couldn't explain it otherwise, and he could not explain why somebody would hoax something like this, because there was nothing to be gotten from the hoax.
It's true. It's not like they were trying to make any money from it.
You're right, and that's the thing. I mean, aside from Ken writing this book...
And it was more so to document it and get it out there, so...
And it was also at the behest of 2109.
Yeah.
Wanted Ken to write the book, too. That's another piece of it.
Well, it's interesting because Thomas allegedly wrote something, 2109 is writing something, and then he writes something.
Yeah.
I wonder, it's like... It kind of makes me wonder, did something like this kind of go on, so you have this kind of linear from like the 1500s to the 1900s to the 2100s, and you wonder, could that be happening somewhere else too, and we just don't know about it?
It's possible, and I mean, the other part of that too is, could it be that, like what you said, why didn't he have them bury something?
Yeah.
Maybe 2109's having them write these books to document this. So that when we hit 2109, we'll know, this was legit. So, yeah, I mean, eventually it'll be proven to be true, but will it be proven to be true in our lifetimes?
Hopefully.
I hope so, because that'd be cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's hard to say. But, yeah, this person that was sitting down with this professor said that he was a really straightforward guy, and that he could not for the life of him understand why anybody would hoax this and what anybody would have to gain from it. Yeah. So they believed, I mean, this person believed his story and believed that he had nothing to gain from it. And again, it's not like they went around and did the talk show circuit afterwards.
Yeah.
They did that one.
That was it.
They did that one documentary, and I didn't see it, but from all the accounts that I read of it, they sat with their backs to the camera and had their voices altered. So it's not like they were looking for publicity.
Yeah, sounds like they were looking for the opposite, but they wanted to get their story out.
Right. So, your opinion on this whole thing? You think this is legitimate? You think it's a big old hoax?
I'm going to say it's legit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Think so?
I think so.
All right. Okay.
And I think the fae are involved.
You think it's some kind of a fairy, otherworldly type of thing?
I think that whatever is going on with the time
is
allowing the fae to get involved.
Okay.
So it's like opening up this magical portal for them to kind of drop in and be, I guess cause more mischief with all the poltergeist activity.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, what about you?
I'm still on the fence about the whole thing. I think a lot of this rests on Gary Rowe. I think that if he has this evidence that he purports to have, that he should come out with it to prove that this is absolutely a real story, a legitimate story. No offense to the man, I don't know him, I don't really know a lot about his work, but I can't just take your word for it. I don't care who you are. I don't want to take your word
But
for anything.
sometimes you just have to do that. You have to take a leap of faith.
In this case, if you want to believe the story, yeah, you just have to take everybody's word for it because there's no evidence. There's no, I mean, you have, again, you have the evidence of the text, of course, of the messages, but that could have been hoaxed.
Well, I'm taking that leap of faith.
But, so I'm gonna say I'm skeptical, but optimistic, I guess.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Okay,
I'll leave a little bit of an opening for some proof.
Yeah.
Because I can't just blindly accept something that's this fantastic.
I'm not blindly accepting. I'm just taking it for what it is, and then I'm like, okay, let's go with it.
Fair enough. Don't mean to disparage you. I'm just saying that I need a little bit more than what's been given to me. But if nothing else, hell of a story.
Yeah.
And I'm really surprised, like I said before, that this hasn't been picked up and turned into a TV show or a movie of some kind. I'm sure now it probably will be. But the fact that it hasn't yet is amazing to me, especially considering the crap that comes out nowadays.
Gosh, the remakes of the remakes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it. But let us know if you've got any thoughts on this, if you've actually read the book or heard the story before, if you've got any theories.
Go to our forum.
Go to our forum.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's hear what you have to say. We're always interested in
Yeah, we'd love to hear from
that.
you.
So, yeah, definitely hit us up. We have a Twitter account.
At Homewrecker Pod.
Our other social media is Instagram.
Homewrecker Podcast. And on our website, homewreckerpodcast.com, you can get a t-shirt or a tank top, whatever you prefer. You can get our logo, which we have up here, or if you're watching, or what Alex is wearing, the family dinner t-shirt. You can choose t-shirt, tank top, whatever floats your boat.
Sure. Help support the show by
Yeah.
picking up some cool merch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and definitely when you go to the website, create a profile, sign on to the forum. Let's get that community growing some more.
You don't have to use your real name.
No, of course not. Nobody uses their real name on message boards, do they? I don't think so. Just see some of the names I saw on some of the boards that I was going on when researching the show.
Nice.
Pretty creative, fun stuff. But yes, definitely hit us up on any of our social media. If you haven't already, if you're listening, please go on over to iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Hit that subscribe button and go ahead and leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, also hit that subscribe button.
And like our episode.
And like, sure, absolutely, of course.
Please and thank you.
And if you've got nothing else to add, I think this is a good place to wrap it up and tell everybody that we'll see you next time.
Guess we'll see you next time.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Until next time, I am the Golden Greek Alexarion. I've been joined, as always, by my beautiful, lovely, gorgeous... You like what I said that, don't you?
I just like being complimented by you.
Well, it's not. It's true. It's all true.
Thank you.
My amazing... Love that smile, too. It's incredible. Everybody's puking now. They're like, okay, enough guy. Get her over with. My trophy wife, Monique.
And you've been listening to the Homewrecker Podcast.